Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. Welcome along to the webinar. We're looking at Sage 50 accounts and specifically the process of running your year end. So what's involved in that? What are the considerations, etc. Now, it will take about 45 minutes to run through this session this morning, and there should be plenty of time for you to submit any questions you might have. Keep them coming during the session, and we'll try and answer as many of those as we can. We're joined this morning by Matt. Matt will be on hand to help answer those questions. Before we get started though, I'm going to jump into a little bit of housekeeping. So for those of you that may be new to webinars, or maybe you're coming along for the very first time, just to see what webinars are all about, we've got loads of sessions, so please get yourself signed up for them. But you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you do enable it, then you will find it's muted automatically. You can't unmute yourself. So any questions for myself or Matt today, you'll just need to pop them into the questions panel. To access that, you just need to click the little speech bubble, which is on your taskbar down the right-hand side of your screen. When you do that, it'll expand the panel. You get that box at the bottom right-hand corner where you can start typing. So pop in your questions, your comments, anything you're not sure about, pop it in there. Remember to click send as well. We are really good on the webinars, but we're not that good. You need to click send, we'll see it, and then we'll try and get an answer to your question. If anyone wants a copy of today's slides, they are available via the handout icon. So give that a click and you'll be able to download that. Do take the opportunity during the session as they aren't available afterwards. Now, they are just a copy of the slides. If anyone wants detailed information on guidance on running your year end, then you will find that available from our help centre. We'll be touching on that a little bit later on in the session. Now, as normal, the session is being recorded and a link to today's recording will be included on your follow-up email. That follow-up email usually gets sent out round about an hour after we finish. Gets sent automatically. So you'll have a link to today's recording if you need a bit of a recap. Maybe you're not ready to run your year end just yet. Or maybe after watching today's session, you put off running your year end. There will be a link to our registration page, so loads of sessions available. Do get yourself signed up. Currently, our timetable runs to the end of April currently. So you've got about a month and a half's worth of webinars that you can get booked onto, including the Management Reports Digital Badge series of webinars. I'll tell you more about that towards the end as well. And you will also get a link to our recordings page. So if you're fairly new to webinars and you think, well, I've missed all these topics, do check out the recordings. It's over 100 different topics available. So plenty to go at to help you get more from your software. So we'll get started. Do keep your questions coming. As I say, we'll try and pick up as many as we can. Now, this is what we're going to be doing in today's session. So this is our running order. I'm going to start with a quick poll, and I've actually got two of those for you this morning. So we'll get you involved a little bit and sort of see if I can gain a little bit of insight into everyone's sort of background. We'll pick up on some common questions as well. So those questions that we like to preempt sometimes the questions, because we get sometimes when you run webinars, you run the same topics time and time again, you get similar questions. So just to nip some of those in the bud, we'll cover those up front. We'll then run through a series of demonstrations. I'll be sharing my screen with you. You'll see me working in the software. So we're looking at preparing for year end, so discussing what's involved, and I've got a few little demos for that one. We'll spend the majority of the time today looking at the running of year end itself, so what's involved when the time comes for you to run that process. A lot easier than you may think, or a lot easier than you may remember. So again, if you haven't run it before, or maybe you have, then it should be a good confidence booster and a bit of a reminder of what's involved. Just at the end, we'll explain more about some of those post-year end checks. So once you run year end, how can you check it's gone through successfully? We'll touch on the optional tasks. Now, we're not going to demonstrate those optional tasks today because they are covered by separate webinars. So you'll need to find those via the recordings page, but I'll point out and give you an idea of what's involved in those optional tasks. A lot of people think those tasks or those processes are included as part of the year-end process itself, and they're not. They are additional optional tasks that if you want, you need to complete separately. We're going to touch on company archives, as one is created during the year-end process. Just explain a little bit about that. And then right at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support. And then if there's anything outstanding question-wise, we'll pick those up as well. So loads to get through, but it is quite a simple process. So if you've never run one before and you think it's going to be really complicated, hopefully at the end of that, we'll change your mind and you'll think, well, actually, it's a lot less involved than I thought it was going to be. Now, I'm going to run a couple of polls just before we get stuck into the session today. So a little bit of background on yourself, first of all. So if I pop that poll on your screen. So question is, how many times have you personally run the year-end in Sage 50 accounts? Now, I'm not on about the business, I'm on about you personally. So how many times have you run it? Have you never done it before? Maybe you've run it once, twice, or have you run it 3 times or more? 3 times or more, you're probably along today just for a bit of a recap on what's involved. So I'll just give that a few more, another 20 seconds or so. Excellent, thanks for that. So I'll just close that poll down. I'll share the results with you as well, just so you can see those, because it's quite interesting. We've got 67% of you having never run a year end before, so hopefully you'll go away with a lot more of a confidence boost. Those that of you have run it once before, hopefully coming along for a bit of a reminder. Maybe you'll pick up some tips along the way as well, and I'm hoping you're feeling a lot more confident than you were when you were coming to run it last time. And the rest of you run it 3 times or more. So again, you might just be going away with, yeah, it's a good reminder of what's involved, a little bit of reassurance, and sort of pat on the back, your understanding is right. Right, let's hide that poll. Second poll I'm going to run for you. And again, if you don't mind getting involved, quickly pop that one on your screen. So how long after your year end are you likely to run the year end process? Obviously, this isn't a test. It's just to see sort of when you hit that year end date. So let's say the end of March, how long are you likely to leave it before you think, right, I'm now going to run that year end? So do you normally run it within a month? Obviously, those that of you who never run it before, just you can ignore the poll. Do you leave it 1 to 2 months? Is it somewhere sort of 3 to 6? Or maybe you leave it longer than 6 months? Quite a varied response there as well. So I'll share those results with you in just a moment. Excellent. Okay, so thanks for taking part on that one. Let me share the results with you as well. So we got just under a third of you generally run it within a month. We got 36% of you run it somewhere between 1 to 2 months, 14% 3 to 6 months, and not surprising for myself, but you might be surprised, we got sort of 21% of you that wait 6 months or more before you come to run that year end. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, how can you leave it that long? I need to run reports. That's something we'll touch on in today's session as well. Right, let's get back to the slides then, and we'll get stuck in. I'm going to start with some of the common questions that you're likely to have. And that first one links to that poll we've just run as well. So the most common question, particularly if you've never run a year end before, we get asked this all the time. Do you need to run the year end before processing in the new financial year? So we'll get questions similar on a similar theme. Can I do my VAT return if I haven't done a year end? Can I do a bank reconciliation or process bank feeds into the new financial year? Can I just enter transactions or create records or enter invoices? And the simple answer is you don't need to wait. Just continue as normal. Enter your transactions. Complete all your other processes as you would in your new financial year. So just do those as normal, and you come back to run that year end as and when you're ready. So you don't need to run that year end before you start processing. Now you may get a message saying date outside financial year. There should be a little tick box on that one, so you can ignore it. Can get a little bit irritating after a while. So you can tick that box to say, right, don't show me this again. I'm aware of that message that pops up every time you enter a transaction. So select the tick box, don't get frustrated with it, and it will just obviously disappear anyway once you do come to run the year end. Now it says there it is common to process 6 months into your new financial year, or even more, before running that year end. So we had 21% of you voted on that poll that you wait 6 months or more. Now I've included some links at the bottom as well, so prepare for year end, shortening and extending your financial year. If you need those and you've downloaded the handouts, those links will take you to the relevant Help Center articles to guide you through those processes. On the right there, that second question, can I shorten or extend my financial year? Now, obviously less common, this question, but it's a fairly common process. So now by default, Sage will always run for a 12-month financial year. So whatever you set that start date to, the end of the financial year will be 12 months later. So if you do need to shorten or extend your financial year, usually it'll be for tax purposes as advised by your accountant, or maybe it's to bring your company in line with a sister company. Then there are step-by-step guides available to guide you through that process. Again, a lot easier than what you think it would be. So the links are below there on the slide if you need them. Right, anyway, let's get stuck into some demonstrations at that point. So I broke it down into 3 parts: prepare for year end, run your year end, and your post year end checks, which are again nice and simple, those. So preparing for year end, probably the most stressful part when you think about year end. You've got this sort of build up and everyone's wanting everything, and you've got transactions to post and corrections to post, and people are jumping up and down for next year's P&L reports. So probably the most stressful part, getting into the right position. Now the first bullet point there, as far as preparing for year end, it says to complete all processing for the financial year. The longer you leave that, the more likely it is you've done that and you've identified any issues. You know, the sooner you run it, the more likely you are to have maybe errors that you haven't discovered yet. But things like purchase invoices, maybe you didn't enter them at the time, you forgot, they were just overlooked. 6 months' time, your supplier's going to have probably chased you by that time, and if you haven't entered in your accounts, you then will. So the longer you leave it, the more likely you are to have processed everything you need to for that financial year. The problem you have with running your year end early is that you may need to pull backdate transactions, backdate adjustments, maybe deletions and corrections. Now, if you need to do that and you've already run your year end, just makes it a little bit more tricky. There may be additional journals then that you need to post to sort of avoid having things like prior year adjustments on your accounts. So the longer you leave it, the more likely you are to have completed everything. Now there is a check that I'm going to run through with you in a moment, and that's checking your chart of accounts. Before you actually run the year end, what you are going to do is you're probably going to generate some management reports. So things like your trial balance, your profit and loss, your balance sheet, aged debtors, creditors, and possibly other reports as well. There's no definitive list for the reports that you should run. So these are the common ones that I've got listed, but again, it will be dependent on what areas of the software you use. Some people use stock, some don't. So do you need to run things like stock valuation? So maybe discuss that with your accountant. What if anything, what reports do they want you to run? What is it you need? Now, obviously you'll check your chart of accounts at this stage before running those reports, because things like the profit and loss and the balance sheet will actually use your chart of accounts. And if there's errors in your chart of accounts, it means that you're going to have issues in your profit and loss and your balance sheet. So you're going to check that. Now, for those of you that have run it a few times before the year end, you might be thinking, well, there's an option to check my chart of accounts in the year end itself? Yes, there is, but too late for your management reports at that point. So I'm going to show you how to check it in just a second. And the other thing, and something you should be doing regularly, check your data and make sure you've got a backup. Right, let's just switch across to my screen then, and we'll quickly run through a little bit of a demo before we get stuck into the year-end process itself. So you should see my desktop at that point. And the one I wanted to mention there was checking your chart of accounts. Now, we do run a separate webinar on this one. There's a recording already available, but in April, we will be running 2 separate sessions, both covering the same things, where Matt's going to guide you through looking at the chart of accounts. So what can you do with that? So you'll hear about the ins and the outs, and we'll run through some demos as to how you can adapt it to make sure you've got the right level of detail on your management reports. But what you want to do at this point is go into nominal codes, and you've got your chart of accounts icon on the top toolbar there. So you give that a click, and you might have multiple charts of accounts. You might have different charts of accounts for different purposes, so a different level of detail. Just depends what your management reports are going to be used for, and obviously who's going to be looking at them. Now, generally, when you're looking at this, if you've got any of them that say, as part of the description in brackets, that says partial, it means there's an issue with it. So it means there's some errors in your chart of accounts. But I would encourage you just to go through them, each of them in turn. And all you do is you would highlight it on the list, click edit, and then all I would want you to do is you click the check option at the top. And this is, fingers crossed, this is what you're going to get. No errors found in this chart of accounts. So we can just OK that. So no issues. It means that things like all of the nominal codes that we've got set up are included in our chart of accounts. Nominal codes aren't included more than once. Your ranges that you have within your chart of accounts don't overlap each other. Now, just supposing there are errors, so if I go and change this range as an example, again, this would be something that Matt covers in detail. If I just change this range to generate an error, I'll just quickly OK that. So we now know this one's got errors. It says partial as part of that description. So if you've got any like that, do make sure you go into edit your chart of accounts. And again, just click check. And instead of it coming up no errors to report, and you click OK, this time we've got a chart of accounts errors window pop up. So I'll just preview that. And this is the kind of information it's going to generate. This is probably the most common type of error that you're likely to have. And it's where you've got a nominal code that isn't, as it says there, it's not represented in the chart. So it's not included in any of the nominal ranges. And what that would mean, in this case, I've got a few sales accounts here that I use. So if I've got balances against those accounts, when I come to run the likes of a profit and loss report, this chart of accounts wouldn't include those figures because they're not included in the chart of accounts. So you want to make sure you've got no issues in your chart of accounts. Obviously, you can print that if needed. There's a number of different errors, and you'll find information on correcting that within our help center. Now, in my case, I'm just going to set that back to what it was. I will click check again at the top just to make sure I haven't got any errors left. So we just click yes to that prompt, and I'm back to the information, no errors found in this chart. So we just OK that. So that's what you want, no errors found in this chart. I click save at that point, and you'll see the word partial has been removed. So it no longer contains any issues. Now, what I would recommend as well, when you come to the point of running reports for your year end, you've got an opportunity to almost like save copies of them at this point. So I'm not going to run through them and tell you what they show or anything like that at this stage. Again, as part of the management report series of sessions that we're running at the beginning of April, we will be doing that in more detail. But if you just pick on a trial balance as an example, so as part of the year-end process, the preparation stage, you're likely to print one of these out. But as well as viewing it, what you can also do, and obviously you can print it if you want to, as well as that, you've got an option to export a copy of it. So if we click export at the top, it means we can take a copy of that. So on my desktop, what I might do is I've got a folder actually called Sage Reports, and you can see the one from my last time I ran this demo. Give it a file name, but it will save your report as a PDF. And it means that you're building up almost like a mini archive, so a copy of those reports as you're running through that year end. And it just means if you need one, you get 6 months down the line, you think, oh, what was the trial balances at the end of my previous financial year? It means you can easily access that. You've got a PDF copy of it. So you're building up that mini archive as you're running through that year-end process. Now you can do that for any time, maybe a part of month end. You can do it maybe if you work in a credit control function within the business. Again, you can run reports and save copies of them as PDFs. So it's just a case of saving it into wherever you want and giving it an appropriate file name. So I'll just overwrite the one that's there. And that's it done. So do that for your reports as you run through. You might never need them, but at least you've got them. Nice and easy to access then. Now the final option was to check your data and also to back up. Now I'm not going to run through that unless anyone really has a strong desire for me to do that, but it's something that you should be familiar with. If you're using Sage on a daily basis, you should be checking your data and backing up also on a daily basis. If you do that, you cover your back. So if you ever did have any issues, servers crashing or not being able to access data, or you've got data corruption for whatever reason, then you've always got those backups to hand should you need them. Hardware can be replaced, software can be reinstalled. Your data is the most important thing to do with Sage accounts. So make sure you check your data regularly and back it up as well. Right, so that was the sort of the basics of preparing. So again, the longer you leave it, the more likely you are to have completed all your processing. Next, we're going to move on to actually running the year end itself. So this is the bit where quite commonly people will contact our support team, and those of you that did say at the beginning of the session, well, I've never run that before, and there was quite a high percentage who've never run a year end before. Chances are you might be tempted to ring up our support team and say, actually, could you just guide me through that process? I've never done it. And after guiding people through it, the common reaction was, oh, is that all there is to it? Yeah, the year-end process, as you'll see over the next few minutes, it's a really simple task. Just a case of running through the little wizard that you can see a screenshot of there, and just follow that through. There's very few options on there, but we're going to run through that next, and I'll just explain what each of the options relates to. Now, options-wise, when we get into it, there is an option to create an archive. You'll have an opportunity to set budgets for what will be a new financial year. The software will post journals to clear down your profit and loss balances as at the year end for the financial year that you're closing. And it will also advance your financial year as well. And you also have the option to set a lock date. I'll explain each of those as we run through. Right, let's get back to my screen then. And we'll run through that process. Now, to run year end, if you've got colleagues that also use Sage, they will need to be out of the software while you complete this process. If anyone's on remote data access, it doesn't matter sort of where you run this from. It used to, but not these days. So what used to be termed main site or remote sites, no such thing now if you're on the up-to-date versions. So you can run the year end from any of the PCs from any location. And to do that, all we're going to do is go into Tools, Period End, and then down to Year End. Now, just in case anyone is about to ask, well, what about month end? So month end is just normal processing. So going back to when I was talking about preparing, complete all your processing. So you probably would have, if you do a month end and you run that option in Sage, you probably would have already done that for a number of months in what will be your new financial year. So again, you just come back to run those year-end report, the year-end process as and when you're ready. So we're going into Tools, Period End, Year End. Let's click yes to that prompt because we've got some, obviously got some windows open in the background there. And then we get that wizard. So the equivalent of what you saw on the screen, on the slides just a few moments ago. Now this year-end wizard is split into 3 key parts: the preparation section, year-end options, and then we've got the run year-end summary. So we're giving you advice on what's about to happen. But let's start with the prepare for year-end. So nice and easy, this one. You've got a few buttons to click on. So first one is check your data. Now you can click it, it'll run through checking your data. If you're taking my advice, you probably would have done that. So you've been doing that regularly. So if you've just done that before you've come into, let's say you finished work yesterday, you checked your data, you backed up, nothing has been done since, then you don't necessarily need to do it again. If there's any doubt, just click the button. Now on mine, it's incredibly quick. I'm just running from my laptop today. We've got just over 1,000 transactions on there, so it's a tiny set of data, this one. So it tells me no problems to report on data files. Obviously yours, just let it run through. You'll get a progress bar, let it run through. So I'll get the click OK. If there were any errors, warnings, comments, then all you need to do, just click the tabs down the side here, and it'll give you the detail of what they are. And then you can use the help if necessary to look them up, say, right, well, this is what the error warning or comment is, and it'll give you some advice on what it means and, if anything, what you need to do about that. But nothing to worry about in my case. I haven't got any errors, warnings, or comments. So just close that. Next, check your chart of accounts. Again, if you followed my advice, you'll have already done this. So again, nothing to worry about, but I would encourage you, because it's so quick, this one, just give it another click. Have any additional nominal codes being created in the meantime, and maybe they're missing from the nominal, from the chart of accounts? So just give it a quick click. It tells me all nominal codes are represented in your chart of accounts, so we can just OK that. Next, it says take a backup. Again, similar to checking your data. If you've done that regularly and you've maybe done it, say, the previous nights, and you've not done anything since, you don't necessarily need to take another one if nothing's changed. If in doubt, quickly take one. Now, when I'm running year end, what some people like to do is take an all files backup. So you can tick the box here. But I'm just going to back up my data files. And I'll call it something. So we'll say year end 2024. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that into the same location. So on my desktop, that Sage Reports folder, I'll just pop it in there. And then we'll just OK that. Again, it's a split second on mine because it's so small. And then it says the backup has been successful. So just OK that. Again, yours, you're probably going to have a much larger data set than me. So just let that run through. Next option is the archive location. Now leave this box ticked. I'm going to come on to archives a little bit later as to what an archive is, what it does, etc. But it creates an archive as part of the year-end process. Leave it ticked. It will be ticked by default. You can set an archive location. it'll show you the archive location. All you can do is change the description and the name of the archive folder. I'm just going to accept the defaults. Again, if in doubt, just accept those defaults. So we'll OK that as well. So prepare for year end, nice and easy. You've clicked to check your data, you've clicked to check your chart of accounts, you've clicked and taken your backup, and this one you're just going to leave ticked. So that first section, that's it complete. We then come on to the middle section, the year-end options. So 3 options in here. Firstly, first option there to do with budgets. Now, if you don't use budgets and you've got no intention of using budgets, then you don't need to do anything with this. If you do use budgets, well, you've got your option here. And basically what it's saying is, once you run the year end, you've got an option here to set your budgets for your next financial year. So if I tick the box, it will give me some options. So for my next financial year, what do I want the budgets to be based on? So for nominal and department budgets, for instance, I can tick the box to say, yeah, I want to create those. Do I want to base those on the actual figures? So for instance, my actual sales figures for the financial year I'm finishing, do I want to use that as a budget for next year? The existing budgets, do I just want to leave those in place? In which case I could select that option. Just use exactly the same budgets for my next financial year. Or if you're on the standard or professional levels, and some of you may have been on my budget webinars over the last couple of weeks, then if you're on the standard or the professional level, you have that option where you could have set up the advanced budgeting method, or one of the 3 advanced methods. It will ask you, do you want to use the forecast year? Now, if you have set up a forecast year, the whole point of that is to say, right, that's what I want my budgets to be for the next financial year. Now, no matter which option you choose, you'll still be able to amend those budget figures. So it'll set them for you, but you'll still be able to override them if necessary. So you've got the opportunity to set nominal and department budgets, but also stock budgets as well, and you get the actuals or the budgets option. What do you want to base those stock budgets on for next year? Now I'm just going to accept all of those, so I'll just OK that. So that's the budget options. Again, if you're not using budgets, no intention of it, or you're thinking, well, I don't want to set up any budgets just yet, but I might set them up once I start, then no need to tick this at this stage. Next option is the year-end journals date. So this is the date to appear on the year-end journals, the last day of the current year. So when we run year-end, what the software does is it looks at your profit and loss nominal code. So generally that's from 4,000 onwards if you're using the default nominal structure. So your sales, your purchases, your direct expenses, your overheads, and possibly the taxation section as well, if you use that. So from 4,000 onwards, what it will do is it will look at your profit and loss balances as at the year end. So in my case, it's as at the end of December 2024. And it looks at those year-end balances, and what it will do is, if there is a year-end balance against a nominal code, it will post a journal to essentially clear down that year-end balance. So let's say against one of my sales nominal codes, let's just say 4,000, normally you'd expect it to build up a credit balance over the course of the year. And the software will look at that and say, right, well, there's a balance there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post a journal for that amount, but I'm going to post a debit to essentially cancel out that year-end balance. And it will do that using this date here. Now this date will actually default to the end of your current financial year that you're closing down. So leave it as that. So you don't need to do anything with it. The final option is it relates to what we term the lock date. Now, the lock date is a very simple feature, and we've got a separate webinar recording on using the lock date and how it can be used to prevent people from backdating transactions. So do check out the recording if you want a little bit more detail on it. So you've got the option here to actually switch it on and also specify a date. Now you can set the lock date in three areas within Sage 50 accounts. One is obviously year end, what we're looking at now. If anyone actually runs the month end option, you'll see it in there as well. But you can also just go into settings and then lock date settings at any time. So settings on that top menu, and you'll have an option called lock date settings. And again, you can switch that on and off at any time, and you can amend the date as well if required. The idea with a lock date is if someone tries to backdate a transaction prior to the date you specify, then they're either going to get an error or a warning, and that error or warning will depend on their access rights. So again, that will be explained in more detail in that other webinar recording. So it means that, for instance, mine, it's set to the 1st of the 1st, 2025, which is going to be the first day of my new financial year. So once I've run the year end and I'm in that 2025 financial year, what I don't want happening is just anyone and everyone backdating transactions or deleting transactions prior to that date. So that's where the lock date comes in useful. But again, check out that recording if you want a little bit more detail on it. Now, other than that, we've got our summary at the bottom of essentially what's about to happen when we click this button at the bottom. So it's telling me I'm running the year end for, in my case, 31st of December 2024. It's going to change my financial year, so it advances it by a full 12 months. It's going to transfer my balances from the profit and loss accounts. It'll set the profit and loss accounts essentially for the new financial year as well. So those from 4,000 onwards, essentially that brought forward balance would have been removed. So we're ready for the new financial year. It's going to archive a copy of my data because I've got this option ticked. I've then got two options that refer to the budgets because again, I've ticked it and I left the options ticked within it. And then that final option refers to the lock date because obviously I've left that, I've ticked that and I've set that date as well. But other than that, so if I hadn't been talking so much and you've come into the year end screen, so tools, period end, year end, other than that, that's it. You're ready to click that option at the bottom. So again, this option, nice and easy. You just got a few buttons to click on and choose your option, maybe for that date at the bottom. So we're ready to run it. Natalie, your question there, if you set a lock date, so if it's used, could you still do post journals into a previous financial year? Yes. So you will, again, it'll be dictated by your access rights, or your access levels, we call it these days. So potentially you will still be able to do that. So again, you would either get that error saying you can't do this, or you'll get a warning saying you've entered the date prior to the lock date. Are you sure you want to continue? So if you log in as manager, for instance, you're going to get that warning rather than the error. But again, that will be covered in that webinar recording. So nothing to worry about. You can still do that if required. So anyway, we're ready to run that year end. So I'm just going to click the button at the bottom. You get a confirmation. So it just tells me you're about to run the year end for January 24 to December 24. In my case, do you want to continue? So I'll click yes. Little progress bar. Obviously, mine's a tiny set of data, so it runs through really quickly. It's local data on my laptop as well, so again, even quicker. If you're running across a network and maybe you've got a massive set of data, that progress bar is going to take a lot longer. Let it run. Don't need to do anything. If it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, possibly longer, just let it run. Don't be tempted to crash out when it's still running. Now, it does give me an option of a year-end report. I'll just preview that so you can see that, exactly see what it brings up. So this is the year-end report. Basically, the year-end report is just a list of those ledger year-end postings. So we mentioned against nominal 4,000, you would have had probably a credit balance against that nominal code. It's going to post a journal debit to that nominal code as at the year-end date for whatever the year-end balance was to essentially zero it down. So it does that for each of your profit and loss nominal codes. So generally that's everything from 4,000 onwards. Now, again, you can print it. You might export it, save a copy of that one. But otherwise, we're just going to click close. Now, this message here tells me that the year-end process for the financial year ending at the end of December 2024, it's been complete, and it tells me what my new financial year is now. Just make sure that is right. That's your best check. Just make sure that's correct. So if it is, we click OK. And that's the year-end complete. That's your main sort of check that the year-end's gone through successfully. It'll tell you at the bottom now on your status bar what your new financial year start date is. And it should agree with that message you got. Do not be tempted to think, oh, that was quick, I'll just run it again just to make sure. Every time you run that year end, it's going to advance that financial year start date. So don't do that. Just read that message, make sure the financial year is correct, click OK, job done. And that's the year end complete. If you've got any questions at that point, start popping them in. Now, I want to quickly cover the optional tasks. There's a number of tasks that a lot of people assume would be completed automatically when you run that year-end process. So getting rid of all the transactions, getting rid of all the customers and suppliers, nominal, maybe bank records that you no longer use, getting rid of product and service records, deleting your old invoices from your invoices list. Those processes are what we would term these optional tasks. So after you run year end, if you want to go through those tasks, you can do. There are some great recordings available on our webinar recordings page. Remember, that link is included, and it will be included on your follow-up email. So if you want to find out about removing all the transactions or old invoices from your invoices list, do check those out. A lot of people think that when you run year end, it'll do that automatically. It doesn't, but they are optional. Optional is the key word there. You don't have to do that. Final one I wanted to pick up on with you this morning is company archives. Now, when we went through that wizard, there was that little tick box that I went into, and it referred to an archive. Now, again, there is a webinar recording on company archives, so do check that out as well. It'll tell you more about what an archive is and what you can do with it. But basically, a company archive is, or what's happening there is, when you run year end, what the CH50 is going to do is it's going to take a copy of your data as it stands, as at that point in time. So all of your data as it stands at that point in time. So in my case, if I'd had 10 years worth of data in my accounts, it would take a copy of all of that. My current year, plus maybe I'd enter transactions into 2025. It's all of the data as it stands. It takes a copy of that and it creates what you term an archive. Now, that archive will have, as part of that data, it's got the relevant financial year associated with it as well. So it's, in my case, that archive would be where the financial year is set to January 2024 to December 2024. And that means I could, if needed, I could go back into that archive. I can view it, I can look at the information. It's there for reference purposes, reporting purposes as well. So if needed, let's say in 6 months' time, I didn't create that PDF, or we've deleted the PDF copies of the reports, and I need a copy of that, it means that I could go revert back to that archive. I could log into the archive company, I could access that, and I could generate reports because they would be as at that point in time when the archive was created. So again, if you want to find out more about archives, do check out our webinar recordings. The link will be included on your follow-up email just as normal. So loads of almost like extra reading and extra homework if you would like. So they are available should you want them. Right, brings us to the end of this morning's session. If you've got any final questions, been really quiet on the questions this morning. So you haven't kept Matt very busy this morning. So if you've got any final questions for him, if you want to pop them in there, and we'll try and pick them up before we end the webinar. If anyone does want a copy of today's slides, they are available to download. Remember, the detailed information, that step-by-step guide, you'll find that in the Help Center. The Help Center, nice and easy to access. Just open your browser, head along to sage.co.uk/help. You can search the knowledge base. You'll find in there support guides, maybe step-by-step articles. There might be short articles depending what it is you're searching for. You'll find the webinars in there, maybe short videos. And if you can't find what you're after, it will explain the options for getting in touch with our support team as well. So they should be on hand should you need any support with anything. Right, let's see what else we've got. So webinars wise, obviously that link will be included. Right, any questions? We've got a couple. We'll try and pick those up in just a moment. Webinars wise, the link to get yourself registered or access those recordings, that link will be included on your follow-up email. Do have a good look through that timetable. I mentioned at the beginning it currently runs up to the end of April, so the end of next month. Loads of sessions in there. Get yourself registered if you are interested. They're all free to attend. Before I start helping out with the questions, just in case anyone's about to leave, many thanks for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it. You've found it useful. For those of you that have run year end multiple times before, you might just be going away thinking, well, I knew all of that. Hopefully you've got that reassurance. Some of you may have picked up some tips along the way. Some have may have just clarified what the options referred to. And if you've never run it before, I'm hoping you're feeling a little bit more confident as well. So if you're about to leave, many thanks. There'll be a little survey pop up as you leave today's session. So if you can take a moment just to complete that, it should take you about a minute max. Give us a score, share any thoughts, ideas, maybe for improving the webinars. Let us know what topics you'd like to see going forward. Pop it on there. So if you can do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. Your follow-up email will be with you in around about an hour's time. Right, okay, so just quickly pick up some questions. I can see Matt's picking up one. Diva, your question there, please can you tell us about prior year adjustments? A prior year adjustment, if you need to backdate one, it's just a case of backdating the transaction basically. So if I just go back to my company as an example, if I needed to, for whatever reason, let's say I've run year end and this set of data I'm now in 2025, let's say for whatever reason I need to post a journal. I can still do that. I can still go into nominal codes. There's nothing necessarily that I need to do. I can still do a journal entry. I can pop in a reference, just put my initials in. And then if I need to, I can still backdate to my previous financial year. Now, when I do that, I do get that warning. Date entered is outside current financial year. So that's that little tick box that I was mentioning. If you start entering transactions into your next financial year, you get a similar tick box. So I'll okay that, and it would still let me post a transaction or a journal in this case if I need to. Let me just put something in there. It doesn't really matter what it is. Just use that one. I'll do test again. And then I'll just save it. Now I am going to get a warning at this stage. So remember when I mentioned lock date earlier? I said you're either going to get a warning or an error. So I'll get a warning because I'm logged in as manager. And it just says the transaction date is set before the current lock date. Do I want to proceed? So I can just click yes to that prompt. And that's it done. So I can still backdate transactions to or prior to the start of what is my new financial year. Now, what you need to do beyond that will be dependent on what that sort of prior year adjustment is for. There is information in our help center on the next step. I hope that makes sense. So do check that out because there's a few different scenarios and it very much depends on what you need to do. I'll just add to Deirdre's query as well that Matt picked up. So Deirdre was just asking when you post audit journals for the year. So if you need to backdate that, if you've already run your year end, do you need to run the year end again? So the answer to that one is no, you don't run the year end again. Remember, as I said, every time you run that financial year, it advances the financial year. So in my case, if I was to do that, it would then advance the start date to begin January 2026. So don't run it again. Refer to the information in our help center if you need to backdate postings into a previous financial year. That would guide you through. And if you're not sure, because there are a number of different scenarios, get in touch with our support team and they can discuss that with you. Right, okay, so those were the two that we had outstanding. So many thanks for those. If you think of anything else, do check out the information in our help center. Obviously, our support team is on hand as well, and they'll be able to give you further assistance if necessary. So once again, many thanks for coming along today. Hope you have enjoyed it. Do take that moment to complete that survey. That should pop up as you leave. And watch out for your follow-up email and get yourself registered for those upcoming webinars. So many thanks, and hopefully we'll see you again.